I took this job because I didn't have any better options. That's what I told my boss the first week, standing in his office with a cheap HR folder in my hand and sweat cooling between my shoulder blades. I watched the sentence land on his face like a drink he hadn't ordered, neutral at first, then a tiny shift around his eyes, the kind that says, "Good. Now I know exactly what you are." He smiled anyway. Cole Harrington always smiled. His office was the kind of place that makes you feel like an extra in someone else's movie. Glass wall with a view of the city, two perfectly trimmed plants that probably had a care schedule more precise than my last job's payroll, and a bookshelf full of books I was pretty sure he'd never opened past page 3. Everything in there whispered controlled, like nothing happened without his approval. "Honesty," he said, leaning back in his chair. "That's rare, Ethan. I appreciate it." He said my name like he'd picked it off a list of options, too. I shrugged, trying to look calmer than I felt. "Just figured you'd rather hear the truth than some speech about passion for corporate logistics. I needed a job. You had one." He tapped the folder with one finger. No ring, no watch, just a vein that appeared when he pressed too hard. "Well, we're glad to have you. And don't sell yourself short. People don't land here by accident." That was the first lie of the building. People did land there by accident. I was proof. 3 months earlier, I'd been standing in a different office, handing in a badge that no longer opened doors. Layoffs, cost optimization, nothing personal. 23 of us walked out with cardboard boxes and a printed letter thanking us for our service. I walked out with a car payment, a rent contract, and a savings account that looked like a countdown. I told myself I'd be picky. That lasted about 2 weeks. By the time Harrington and Cole called me in, I'd already stopped pretending I was above entry-level corporate work. The recruiter talked about growth opportunities and dynamic environment. I heard health insurance and direct deposit, and said yes before they finished the second round of fake enthusiasm. So there I was, in Cole's office on my second day after HR's smiling slideshow on company values. He'd called me up for a quick welcome chat. "Tell me about yourself," he'd said, lacing his fingers together like we were about to negotiate a merger. I gave him the basics. Age, old job, what I'd done there, why I left. I left out the part where I'd sat in my car for 20 minutes after the layoff email, staring at the steering wheel like it owed me an apology. "And why us?" he asked. "There are a lot of companies in this city." I could have given him the script. "I've always admired your brand. I'm excited for the challenge. I love your culture." I'd heard it repeated in the lobby, people practicing in their reflections. Instead, I looked at the skyline behind him and heard myself say, "Honestly, I took the job because I didn't have any better options." The line slipped out too clean, too fast, like it had been waiting. Silence. Just the faint hum of the air conditioning and the soft tick of whatever expensive clock he kept behind me. His eyes narrowed a fraction. The corners of his mouth twitched. Not down, not up, just adjusted. "Is that so?" he said. I nodded. "I need stability for a while, a paycheck, somewhere to land. I can do the work, I'll do it well, but I'm not going to pretend this was my childhood dream." He studied me the way you look at a tool you're not sure is durable or disposable. Then he smiled, big and white. "Refreshing. Truly. Most people rehearse answers for days. You show up and give me the raw version." "Not sure if that's a compliment," I said. "Oh, it is," he replied. "I'd rather know exactly what motivates my people. Makes it easier to help them grow." He said "my people," like he was talking about inventory. I didn't notice that then. I just felt lighter. I'd told the truth, and the ceiling hadn't fallen in. On the way out of his office, I even thought, maybe this won't be so bad. Maybe he's one of the good ones. My new desk sat in a corner of the open-plan floor. 3 monitors, a fresh notepad, and a chair that didn't squeak. The team lead, a guy named Mason, did the polite tour. "That's IT. That's finance. Kitchen's over there. Coffee's free, but tastes like they brewed it with a grudge. Harrington's office up there. He pointed to the glass cube above us. You'll see him walking the floor a lot. He likes to stay connected. I noticed the way Mason's fingers did air quotes, without his face changing. Everyone was friendly in that distant, professional way. Names, roles, a joke about bringing donuts next Monday. They seemed tired, but not miserable. The kind of people who schedule their stress. Around noon, I went to the kitchen for coffee I already regretted. When I turned around, Cole was there, hand on the fridge, sleeves rolled up just enough to make him look busy instead of executive. "Settling in, Ethan?" he asked. "Trying," I said. "Still figuring out which printer doesn't hate me." He laughed like I'd told a polished joke. "You'll get the hang of it quickly. Mason speaks highly of your background." That was news to me, but sure. Cole stepped a little closer, lowered his voice just enough that it felt like a confidence. "Listen, about what you said earlier?" I raised my eyebrows. "About not having better options." His eyes were warm now, almost sympathetic. "Don't worry. We've all been there at some point. The important thing is, you're here now. This place can be very rewarding for people who need it." "Appreciate that," I said. He clapped a hand on my shoulder. Firm. A little too familiar for hour 3. "Just remember, when someone's short on options and a company gives them one, that creates a certain alignment. You understand?" I nodded because that's what you do when your boss says something vague that sounds like a philosophy quote, but feels like a reminder. "Good man," he said, releasing my shoulder. "I like people who know where they stand. It makes decisions easier." For the rest of the day, I buried myself in onboarding documents, logins, workflows. I barely thought about that conversation until I watched him talk to other people. The tone shifted. With senior managers, he was all collaboration and vision. With my level, he was kinder, warmer. But every now and then I saw that same little tightening around his eyes when someone mentioned money, deadlines, or mistakes. On Thursday, I stayed late to finish a report. The floor emptied out in waves, screens going dark, chairs pushed in. Cole passed by around 7 on his way to the elevator. "You're still here," he said. "Just wrapping this up," I answered. "I want it clean before I send it." He glanced at my screen, nodded slowly. "I like that. People who have something to prove usually work harder." I opened my mouth to say something, then closed it. Something to prove. That's how he'd filed me away after one sentence in his office. When I finally shut down my computer, the building felt different. Quieter, obviously, but also heavier. Like now that most people were gone, the walls could stop pretending to be inspiring and just be walls. On my way out, I passed the reflection of the glass balcony, where his office overlooked the floor. From that angle, my desk was just a small square in a grid of small squares. Replaceable. At home that night, sitting at my tiny kitchen table with leftover pasta and a spreadsheet of my bills, I replayed the moment I'd said it. I took the job because I didn't have any better options. It had felt brave then. Honest. Adult. Now, with the day behind me and his hand still phantom heavy on my shoulder, it started to feel like something else. A confession I'd handed to the wrong person. Cole didn't wait long to show me what my honesty had bought me. It started small. A remark here, a glance there, nothing you could point at directly. But the tone shifted. Subtle. Deliberate. Like he was testing how much weight my spine could take before it bent. The first real sign came 2 weeks later, during a team meeting. We were reviewing a bottleneck in our logistics chain, something that predated my hiring by at least 6 months. Cole stood at the front of the conference room, sleeves rolled just high enough to signal leadership without effort. "Ethan," he said suddenly, "walk us through what went wrong last quarter." "Last quarter? Before I even had a badge." I blinked. "I wasn't here last quarter." He smiled like he'd caught me in a joke I didn't realize I'd told. Right. But you've read the reports. Give us your take." The room went quiet in that careful way corporate rooms do. attentive enough to seem supportive, distant enough that no one risks catching stray fire. I cleared my throat. From what I've seen, the issue was with outdated routing software and a lack of regional redundancy. The reports flagged it months before. Cole nodded. So you're saying the team missed it? No, I said carefully. I'm saying the tools weren't adequate. Cole leaned against the screen, arms crossed. Sounds like excuse language. Something pricked at the back of my neck. I wasn't defending myself. I was explaining the data. But he just turned the room's eyes on me like I was. Mason jumped in, voice steady. It was a system issue, Cole. You know that. But Cole didn't acknowledge him. His smile stayed fixed on me, polite and sharp. After the meeting, Mason clapped my shoulder on the way out. Don't take that personally. He always finds a new favorite stress ball. Feels intentional, I muttered. He didn't disagree. The next week, I got the first of what became a pattern. Impossible deadlines wrapped in compliments. Ethan, your analytical skills are strong. I'm trusting you with this, Cole said, placing a file on my desk. End of day tomorrow. It was a 3-day task. I stayed until 9 p.m., eyes burning, screen dimmed to protect a headache I'd been ignoring. Cole passed by once, saw me working, and instead of offering help or even acknowledgement, he asked, You're focused, I hope? Focused, not exhausted, not overextended, focused. I delivered the report on time, clean and airtight. The next morning, he didn't comment on it. Instead, he slid another file toward me as he passed my desk. Let's see if yesterday was skill or luck. Inside was double the work. By Friday, I understood the rhythm. He gave me tasks no one else wanted and wrapped them in language that framed it as opportunity. Growth, challenge, responsibility. But each one carried the same message, unspoken. You said you had no better options, so you'll take whatever I give you. And then came the moment that erased any doubt. We were at a Thursday afternoon operations sync, a dozen people around a glass table, the kind of meeting where executives float in and out like visiting royals. Cole walked in mid-discussion, clapped his hands once, and said, let's pick up from the bottleneck issue. Ethan, since you're here because we saved you from unemployment, why don't you start? A few people shifted in their seats. I felt something tighten in my jaw. That's not what I said. He tilted his head. Isn't it? I seem to recall you saying you had no better options. I swallowed back heat. I said I took the job because I needed stability, not because I expected to be anyone's pity case. A couple of eyebrows went up around the table. Cole smiled like this was a sparring match he'd been waiting for. Relax, Ethan. We all start somewhere. No shame in it. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized he wasn't teasing. He was establishing hierarchy, publicly, and he was using my own honesty as the hammer. I forced the discussion back to the project. The moment passed, at least on the surface, but the room wasn't the same anymore. People avoided my eyes, either out of sympathy or fear Cole would notice them noticing. Later, in the hallway, Ava from finance caught up to me. He shouldn't have said that. He likes control, I said. She lowered her voice. He likes leverage, and you handed him some. It stung because it was true, but that was just the beginning. The real shift happened the following Monday. I came in, sat down, opened my laptop, and found an email from Cole, sent at 11:47 p.m. the night before. Need preliminary projections for Q2. Not final, just workable. Deadline, 10 a.m., Monday. Thanks. Q2 projections are a week-long job, even with a full team. I stared at the timestamp, then the deadline, then back at the timestamp. Mason walked by, saw the look on my face, and whistled low. He sent that last night? Yeah. Deadline? 10. Mason scratched his jaw. He knows that's not possible. I know. And he knows you know. I know that too. Mason exhaled. Then he's not testing your skill. He's testing your breaking point. I worked like a man running through mud. Fast, but never fast enough. At 9:58, I sent what I could. Accurate, but incomplete. At 10:04, Cole appeared at my desk. 4 minutes late, he said lightly, and not fully complete. You gave me 10 hours, I replied evenly, most of which I was asleep for. Professional environments require adaptation, he said, tapping the top of my monitor. Or maybe you're not ready for this level yet. Something simmered in me then. Not anger, clarity. I saw exactly what he thought of me and exactly how he planned to use it. But clarity doesn't change power. Not immediately. That came later. For now, all I could do was watch the shape of the trap he thought he'd built around me and quietly start stepping out of it. By Thursday, I had regained enough internal balance to push back in small ways. I began documenting everything, saving every assignment with timestamps, keeping records of unrealistic deadlines, contradictory instructions, any moment where Cole used implication instead of direction. Not out of malice, out of self-preservation. Then, late Friday afternoon, Cole dropped something new on my desk. A structural audit request for a project I'd never touched. Need this by Monday morning, he said. This is an entirely different department, I replied. You're capable, he said. And hungry. Hungry. That word stuck. I opened the file and froze. The audit request referenced numbers that didn't align, timelines that weren't possible, decisions I knew he'd approved personally. Something was off. Actually, something was wrong. I closed the folder slowly. That night, sitting alone at my kitchen table, the streetlight casting a pale square on my floor, I realized something simple and sharp. Cole wasn't just using me. He was setting me up, and he thought I was too grateful, too optionless, too hungry to notice. He was wrong, and he was about to learn that the person he thought had no leverage had just found it. The thing about being underestimated is this. People stop watching you closely. Cole was so sure he had me pinned, a desperate hire, a man who'd take whatever scraps he threw. He didn't notice when I stopped reacting and started paying attention. The audit file he'd dropped on my desk wasn't just sloppy. It was dangerous. Dates didn't match, cost approvals weren't logged, and entire sections referenced non-existent vendor updates. Either someone in another department had imploded, or Cole had signed off on something he shouldn't have. I spent the weekend combing through the paper trail he hadn't expected me to examine. Emails, change logs, timestamps, meeting summaries. Slowly, a pattern emerged. Cole had pushed through a series of rushed budget reallocations to impress the board. On paper, it looked like he'd saved the company thousands. In reality, the numbers were built on sand. If anyone looked too closely, they'd realize his savings were projections, not outcomes. And the audit he'd assigned me, it was the fuse connected to his little fireworks show. If I submitted a clean audit, he'd use it as proof he'd done everything by the book. If the audit fell apart, he'd blame me. He thought he'd built himself a perfect trap with 2 exits, one for him, one for me. But he forgot I wasn't the same person who'd told him I had no better options. By Monday morning, I had something I hadn't possessed in months. Leverage. Not a weapon. Not blackmail. Facts. Cold, time-stamped, irrefutable facts. I walked into the office with a quietness that wasn't defeat. It was calculation. I placed the incomplete audit folder on my desk and watched Cole glide through the room, greeting people like a host at a party no one actually wanted to attend. He stopped when he saw me. Ethan, my office, now. Inside, he closed the glass door with a soft click. Tell me you finished that audit. I reviewed it, I said. Not what I asked. I know, but you're going to want to hear what I found. He laughed once. Unless you discovered buried treasure, I doubt it. I placed the first document on his desk, then the second, then the email chain he'd forgotten I had access to. With each page, his expression peeled back, first irritation, then confusion, then something darker. This, I said, tapping the discrepancy in the vendor line, is a direct violation of procurement policy. And this, another paper, shows you approved a reallocation before the board signed off. And these cost savings, they're projected, not real, not achieved, which means reporting them to the board. Stop talking, he hissed. I'm not done. His jaw tightened. Do you understand what you're implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. I leaned forward. You tried to use me to validate numbers you already knew were unstable. His nostrils flared, subtle but visible. You have no idea what you're doing. I have every idea what I'm doing, I said, voice steady. And so will the audit division, if they see this. He looked at me with something more intense than anger, fear disguised as superiority. You think I'm scared of an entry-level analyst? He asked. No, I said. I think you're scared of documented truth. For a moment, silence sat between us, heavy, alive. Then he stood, smoothing his tie. Here's how this is going to go, he said. You're going to finish that audit. You're going to clean it up. And you're going to forget whatever conspiracy theory you've convinced yourself of. Not happening. He chuckled, the kind of laugh people use when they've run out of arguments. Ethan, you told me the day you arrived that you had no better options. Do you really want to test that now? I held his stare. That was then. He didn't like that answer, not even a little. But something else was happening, something he wasn't prepared for. The more he pushed, the calmer I felt. My fear had burned out weeks ago. What remained was a kind of clarity I hadn't expected. I gathered my documents, stood, and walked toward the door. We're done here, I said. You walk out of this office, and you're finished, he said. I paused, turned back slightly. You don't have the authority to fire me, and you definitely don't have the authority to bury financial discrepancies with my signature on top. His face reddened. You think anyone will take your word over mine? They won't have to, I said. They'll take the data. And then, without raising my voice, without making a scene, without blinking, I added, they'll take your data, too. I left his office. The glass door clicked behind me. I walked straight to the elevator and hit the floor number of internal audit. Cole thought he owned the narrative. He had no idea the story had already slipped out of his hands. The audit team didn't need much convincing. My documents spoke louder than I could. They didn't gasp. They didn't whisper. They simply asked for copies. Copies were enough. By Wednesday, word had traveled up the chain to corporate oversight, quietly, carefully. Not one person spoke to Cole directly. Not yet. That's how you know trouble is real. The silence around someone becomes dense. Cole moved through the floor like nothing was wrong, but his smile no longer reached his eyes. He watched everything, everyone, especially me. On Thursday morning, he appeared at my desk with a calmness that felt artificial. Walk with me, he said. We took the stairs up 2 floors. No words, no greetings, no audience. He stopped in an unused conference room and shut the door. You think you've won something, he said, voice low. I didn't win anything, I replied. I told the truth. You don't understand, he said, stepping closer. If this investigation continues, it won't just hurt me. It will hurt this entire department. Projects will freeze. People will lose bonuses. Some will lose jobs. Do you want that on your conscience? Do you? I asked. He didn't answer. Cole, you created this mess. You tried to make me clean it up, and you thought my honesty made me your pawn. But the only thing my honesty did was expose your assumptions. You think the board will side with you? They won't have to side with anyone, I said. Numbers aren't political. His jaw flexed. You think you're some kind of hero? No, I said quietly. I'm just done being prey. His eyes flashed, not anger, but recognition. The moment predators realize the animal in front of them isn't running anymore. He exhaled slowly. You've changed? I nodded. You taught me. The room stayed quiet long enough for him to understand the truth he'd been avoiding. He wasn't in control anymore. Not of the situation, not of the narrative, not of me. By Friday morning, the cracks were visible. HR scheduled a routine leadership check-in with him. Audit called for additional records. Corporate requested a meeting with department heads. Cole stood in the center of the floor, shoulders tight, eyes flicking from screen to screen. He looked like a man standing in a field waiting for lightning he thought he could outrun. He couldn't. Just before lunch, he passed my desk, stopped, and said in a quiet voice, meant only for me, "This isn't over." I didn't look up. I know. But something in my tone made him pause, just long enough to understand that the power dynamic he'd relied on had reversed. The man he thought had nothing left to lose now had everything he needed, and the man who thought he was untouchable was now the one standing on a trap door. He just didn't know when it would open, but I did, and it was coming faster than he could imagine. The thing about corporate storms is that they don't arrive with thunder. They arrive with calendar invites. On Monday morning, 3 new meetings appeared on the leadership schedule: audit follow-up, financial compliance review, and an unmissable one, executive oversight briefing. No emojis, no quick sync, no exclamation points, just titles that meant only one thing. Someone's about to answer for something big. Cole walked in at 8:57, 3 minutes early, the way people do when they're rehearsing confidence. He wore a navy suit I'd never seen before. New tie, new watch. When a man who prides himself on control suddenly changes his armor, you know he's scared. He gave the floor a tight smile, but no one smiled back. Not because they'd chosen sides. Corporate people rarely do. But because when a supervisor is in trouble, everyone goes quiet, like the air itself is waiting. At 9:10, he was called upstairs. At 9:11, the entire department pretended to work. At 9:12, I opened a spreadsheet I wasn't reading and exhaled. Slowly, deeply. Not triumph, not revenge. Something calmer. Release. He didn't return for 3 hours. When he finally walked through the glass double doors, he looked folded, creased at the edges. His steps were too exact, too measured, like he was afraid the carpet might shift under him. He didn't look at me. That was the first sign. The second came 20 minutes later, when an HR director, a woman who normally operated 2 floors above mortal humans, appeared beside his desk. She whispered something. He nodded. She gestured to the meeting rooms. He followed her quietly. That was the second sign. The third sign came in the form of a company-wide email. 1 paragraph. Emotionless. Sanitized. Effective immediately, Cole Harrington will be transitioning to a new role within the organization. Interim leadership will be assigned pending structural review. Transitioning. Corporate's favorite word for falling without saying falling. No one spoke. Not really. A few eyebrows rose. Someone let out a low whistle. Mason looked at me, not with celebration, not with pity, but with simple acknowledgement. You didn't imagine it. You weren't crazy. By 4 p.m., Cole had packed a single box, just enough to suggest he'd be back, even though we all knew he wouldn't. HR escorted him to the elevator with a politeness that felt colder than anger. He kept his shoulders straight until the doors closed, and that was it. No outburst, no speech, no final threat or attempt to save face. Just a man stepping into an elevator that was no longer programmed to stop on our floor. The following week was strangely quiet, not peaceful yet, more like the silence after a storm when branches are still falling in the forest, one by one. Audit finished their review. Oversight confirmed the discrepancies. Finance corrected the projections and explained them to the board. No one blamed the department. No one blamed me. Responsibility landed exactly where it belonged. 2 weeks later, a VP I'd never met called me into a conference room. Glass walls, neutral decor, the usual. She looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "You handled yourself with remarkable clarity," she said. "Your documentation was precise. Your timelines were exact. You provided facts without dramatizing. That's rare." I nodded, unsure where this was going. "In light of recent events," she continued, "we're restructuring leadership. We need someone who understands the operational foundation and who doesn't panic under pressure." She slid a folder toward me. "For the next 6 months, you'll serve as interim operations lead, with the option to make it permanent." I stared at the folder, My name on the front. Crisp letters, clean print. Why me? I asked. She didn't blink. Because you were right, and because you never once acted like you were owed anything, I swallowed. I only did what the numbers required. That, she said, standing, is exactly why you're the right choice. Leadership felt different from the inside. Not louder, not more powerful. Just steadier. Like the room finally stopped tilting under my feet. I didn't make speeches. I didn't stand by the balcony the way Cole used to, staring down like he owned the floor. I spent the first week reviewing pipelines, speaking with each team member, one-on-one, clarifying priorities, removing pointless bottlenecks, and people worked better, faster, quieter, not out of fear, but because peace is productive. One afternoon, as I walked past the break room, I caught a glimpse of myself reflected in the vending machine glass. Same face, same posture, same man who once sat in a kitchen with a stack of unpaid bills and said, I took the job because I didn't have better options. But now the sentence felt different. It was no longer a confession, it was a beginning. 3 weeks later, I heard that Cole had been reassigned to a satellite branch in a nowhere coastal town. Title intact. Power gone, no team, no visibility. A quiet corner to wait out his contract. Corporate exile. I didn't feel joy when I heard it, not sadness either. Just a simple, clean line in my mind. Actions have consequences, even for people who think they stand above them. My first Friday in the new role, Mason stopped by my desk with 2 coffees. He set one down and said, Never thought I'd see the day. Me neither. You doing okay? He asked. Better than okay. He nodded. You earned it. I didn't respond with humility or protest. Not this time. Because for the first time in years, the words settled in without friction. That night, as I walked out of the building, the same doors I'd entered months ago with desperation in my pocket and honesty on my tongue, the city looked different, bigger, quieter. Mine, somehow. Outside, the evening wind carried that soft hum you only hear when the day decides to loosen its grip. I paused on the steps, watching traffic move like slow rivers under the streetlights. I felt no anger, no victory high, no lingering bitterness, just steadiness, just breath, just the kind of peace that doesn't demand applause. People assume stories like this end with revenge, but revenge is noisy. What I felt was quiet, firm, a life realigning around truth instead of fear. I didn't destroy my boss. He destroyed himself the moment he mistook honesty for weakness. He thought my confession made me helpless, but all it ever did was make me free. And that was the part he never understood. The job didn't save me. I rebuilt myself, on my terms, in my own time, and I walked out into the night with the simplest truth of all. When you stop apologizing for standing upright, the world stops trying to make you kneel.